We cannot simply say, as the World Bank representative said, well, sometimes there are times when we have to accede to a government's wishes. Well, no, because when we accede to a government wish that wants to develop area, the consequences of that is other capital follows that, and then all is put at risk. And simply put, we can't afford to make those decisions in the future. The decisions we make have to be for and looking forward. So those are my kind of comments. But I want to thank Boyd for doing this, because I think this is a great initiative, and I think we need to figure ways of partnering with other cities around the world and helping them to become part of this ranking, to become themselves much more resilient, so that they can begin to be beyond this list, but actually keys to finding solutions to the future. And every single jurisdiction that the 1,250 ICLEI members and the 6,000 cities that we work with, every one of them has got something to teach. And what's interesting about that is oftentimes is a public good. If you look at our district heating system here, we take the heat off of the raw sewage and use it to heat a neighborhood. That is that we can share with the world. And I think more and more cities are the places where the solutions to the 21st century are being built and can be shared. And it's a proprietary thing where we make a lot of money out of this. We just want to help other cities begin to adapt and be resilient in the 21st century.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have the President of ICLEI, David Cadman. I'm lucky to have him at my side during this presentation. Please send us your questions right into texting into the panel. We have a few more minutes for questions. The first one I got was from Elizabeth, who asked about financing, and in fact, it was just brought up by Councillor Cadman as well. How are these adaptation and mitigation plans going to be financed? And one thing I wanted to mention, and obviously Councillor Cadman was actively involved with, I believe it was Jeff Rugman as well, on building that best practice guide around where financing can come from for this. But I want to reiterate that I didn't really mention, I wrote a book that came out a few months ago called Climate Capitalism with Hunter Lovins, and it's a sequel to Natural Capitalism. And in the book, we basically trace where are profitable business opportunities for cities, communities, and companies to the transition to low-carbon economy. And we have a chapter on energy efficiency, chapter on renewables, chapter on transportation, on buildings, on agriculture, on markets, on adaptation. There are the low-hanging fruit business opportunities. And I think there are, as Councillor Cadman mentioned, there's going to be a lot of need for multilateral financing and funding for adaptation planning and integration and implementation. I think we're also going to find some innovative opportunities for cities to generate revenue and migrate that revenue to mitigation adaptation. You have things like the congestion zone, which helps provide funding for solutions in London, alternative transit solutions, renewable energy projects that the city owns, generates revenue from the sale of that energy. So there are solutions that are out there that actually can generate revenue and result in reductions by themselves, and that revenue generated from mitigation activities can be reinvested in further mitigation adaptation.
I would also add there, one of the hugest capabilities of raising capital is if we go into a cap and trade system, and cities can demonstrably lower carbon and begin to trade that, there is an area where they can raise revenues to begin to their cities and then begin to move up the scale. So that whole market is massive if we begin it.
I have two other questions to get to. We have one from Harvey who's asked, one aspect of resilience is triple bottom line, intense solving of social, economic, environmental issues with a single solution, kind of what I was just alluding to a little bit. This approach is harder to benchmark. I consider TBL in my rankings, and if I'm aware of any rankings that have that. At the city scale, I haven't seen anything that really addresses TBL per se. There's a lot of sustainable city rankings. The one that was put up by the Economic Intelligence Unit for North America recently. Did I think they have like 27 measures they measure sustainable city performance on. Having said that, is there a lot of focus on singular solutions that result in the triple bottom line benefits? And I would say not that much. I haven't seen that much in rankings, and it wasn't really in this version of my ranking either, but I would definitely like to include that in future rankings for sure. The next question is on food from Jody. Does food system planning play into these rankings since it's critical resilience? 100% agree. I couldn't agree more that food security is one of the top issues. In fact, I mentioned earlier in this presentation that I was sitting on Howard Kunstler's webinar yesterday, and he argues for something I'm not sure I agree with. He argues for, because of food security and other factors, he thinks cities are going to get smaller. Despite growth, his argument is it's going to be too hard to feed a population of that size and that density with any type of, he doesn't believe in urban agriculture as a real long-term solution, and so going to have to be located near to your food source. I 100% agree with that, but his underlying point is very valid. Food security is going to continue to be an issue. It's going to get worse and worse all the time between the cost of fuel with a food system that's over-dependent on fuel to begin with, so rising cost of fuel, and then on top of it, the incredible amounts of droughts and flooding that we're going to see that's going to take away more and more historically viable farmland. It's a major issue for the world, and on top of that, we're growing at a pace that's just hard to sustain human life. So, big issue. I did not include food security in this one because it's a tricky one to measure at a city level around the world, but very keen to in future iterations. And if anyone on this call has ideas about how we might come up with these four or measure that in a way that the data could be accessible, I would love to talk to you because it's a very important point. Another one, what is from Joe? What is the biggest threat to a city? Natural disaster risk, rising sea levels, drought, or heat increase? I'm good.
I think the answer is all the above. I think it depends where you are. If you're in an earthquake zone, obviously seismic activity is going to be a major issue. If you're on the coast on a major river system, rise levels or flooding is going to be an issue. If you're in an area that is prone to drought, that's probably going to be accentuated, although we're now seeing places that are normally in drought, northern Nigeria, which are receiving massive flooding. And obviously, with heat increases, that's going to have a profound effect. Just on the food issue, I think we're going to see more and more that green space is going to be highly cultivated in our cities. We're going to see more and more rooftop gardens. We're going to see more and more window boxes. We're going to see more and more integration of grey water into food production because of the shortage of water. We're going to see more and more of our sewage systems put into compost to refresh soils in our urban agriculture. And we're going to see more and more food produced. Obviously, this raises the question of diet. And we know that if you eat a heavy meat diet that's grain-fed, the implications that are going to have to change. We're not going to be able to have grain-fed cows, pigs, chickens, the works. We're going to have to move, and we've moved in Vancouver, for example, backyard chickens, so that people can begin from some of their food locally. But the idea of sort of corporate agriculture, I think, is going to go through a shock in terms of the fuel inputs to it and the transportation inputs to it, but more because people are understanding that in a world that is going to surpass 9 billion people, we're moving to 10.5 billion people, the ability to grow enough food to survive on this planet is going to be sorely pressed by the space that we have available for it and the climate changes that are occurring as well.
Henri, I think we'll wrap up this webinar now, and I appreciate everyone who attended. Again, it will be recorded for those of you who came in late or send it on to colleagues. And also you can, you'll be able to find that recording on the website, boydcohen.com. I can be reached at boyd@co2impact.com if you'd like to follow up any further. And thank you again for your attention.